across other ecosystems, whether it's supply chain, whether it's e-commerce. Do you see them foreseeing this entire infrastructure layer as a risk when they are scaling up, when they are digitally advancing? Because I think the digitization wave is hit there and it's happening, right? What is your word of advice to some of these people out there who are taking the leap digitally, right, and trying to scale digitally, where, as you talked about, we are no longer in that world of where we are seeing things and purchasing, we are digitally transacting. So when we look at this, do you see leaders there having that sense of fear about this possible risk, or do you think that people are not looking at it right now? They are looking at growth. How do you think that ecosystem emerging, and what's the feel there right now?
I think the really large companies are very much aware of these risks and are, I would say, they are investing for the future. Does anybody have a complete understanding of it? I don't think so. But I know that all the large companies and the boards of these companies have very focused agendas as far as managing risk is concerned. And I think the large companies are already creating budgets, and they are creating positions. So they are hiring people for the right roles, and they are empowering them to make these decisions for them. I think the smaller companies, or the medium-sized companies and the smaller companies, I think are still struggling a little bit, because for them it's a very competitive and challenging environment right now, and it's easy to talk about these things, but not so easy when you don't have a balance sheet that's running at its full potential. So I think it's distributed in those cases, but I think in the next 10 years or less, I think this is going to be a mandate. So for example, ESG reporting is already such a big part of everybody's agenda. If you look at some of the new standards that the European Council has come up with, the European Union has come up with, if you are a supplier to them, like let's say you are making jeans, right? Like the whole industry of garments is one of the highest polluting industries in the world, right? They have a huge carbon footprint that they leave behind. When you start providing jeans, let's say, which gets white labeled by a certain retailer in Europe and gets sold in their shop, you're going to be asked the question, right, that is this thing sourced responsibly? How much of what are you doing exactly to reduce your carbon emissions? What are you doing in order to protect your supplier ecosystem, right? How do consumers know what they are consuming? All of these things are going to be asked, and ESG reporting is going to be there in a big way. I think if you look at all the consultancy firms, in fact, I've been in consulting long enough, I can tell you ESG is big on the agenda of all of these guys, because all companies are going to be forced to actually start reporting ESG, and they're going to be, in my opinion, also, I think they're going to get started audited on these standards, like actual emissions data, etc. It's going to be audited by these companies, right? So I think it's going to become a norm based on where you do business. Second is, it's an emerging risk that people have started tapping into. So are organizations ready? Not yet. To answer your question in a nutshell, the large organizations are getting there. The medium and the smaller organizations are actually not yet completely thinking about it, but I'm thinking they'll be forced to do that in the next 5 years.
So Vraj, I think firstly, thanks for coming in and thanks for sharing. I really learned a lot from today, and I think the way you talked about financial literacy, the way you talked about personal motivation, and also the evolving nature of industries, I think it really sets the foundation in terms of what, as everyone who is a part of an ecosystem, should be looking forward to and what they should be. Also, thanks for sharing some of your secret sauces. We are taking a step, as a community, to come in together and do our bit in terms of financial literacy, where we are planning to launch a community called FinSecure India, and the purpose is very simple: to be relevant among stakeholders in the financial ecosystem who are working every day about their business, their risk, credit, and keeping them up to date in terms of the evolving nature and in terms of the evolving world. We'll have a lot of people coming in, and the objective is to be able to provide them the information in right time and be able to empower them. The objective is empowerment. What would be your words of advice or your words of caution or your thoughts in terms of people who are today, somewhere in some of these leadership roles or even in some of these operational roles across these organizations? There are thousands of people in credit and risk today working day in and day out, and for them it is a challenge to be on top of the game. It is a challenge to be being up to date with what's happening, what's the regulator is saying, what the emerging ecosystem of technology is coming out. What would be your thoughts for them or your words of advice for them in terms of, as they look forward to growth, what can they do better?
So, first of all, thank you so much, Rajit, for having me over. This is a delightful conversation and lovely catching up with you as always. I think the idea of community sounds extremely powerful and reinforcing to me. I think a few thoughts, right? I think community, when we talk about community, I always like to think about communities like villages, right? Everybody is very good at. So if you take a village, right? And I love the Asterix, the Gaul example, right? So you had Asterix and Obelix. Obelix carves menhirs. Then you had Cacophonix, who's the bard. Then you have Getafix, who's the druid. And then you have a guy who's a fish seller. You have a guy who's doing something else. Everybody is doing something that they're very good at, right? But when the Romans invade, all of them have this one potion that they drink. And irrespective of whether you are good at making potions or whether you're good at selling fish, all of you can pick up a sword and fight. I think the idea of communities in fintech has to be something like that. Somebody can have a magic potion, right? Or rather, somebody can be good at a certain craft, somebody can be good at another craft, but there has to be someone who creates a potion that is accessible to everybody. And that potion comes from, in this case, the power of ideas and innovation, right? So as long as you have people like that in your community, you should be able to create an army that is capable of delivering the right insights to its end consumers. And I think unlike community in the general context of it, which says, oh, we are sharing ideas, oh, we are talking to each other, we are meeting for seminars, etc. I think there has to be that one overarching piece which says, we as a community are here to not only share knowledge, but we are here to empower each other so that all of us can make our business stronger overall. I think that should be the central premise of this community. And if you get that right, and if folks get that right, they'll start seeing this as co-optation rather than competition. Because it's easy to lose sight of the fact that, oh, he's my competitor, she's my competitor, I will not share. I think the world is unlike 15 years ago, where there were software companies who wrote such extensive licensing agreements that it was difficult to get out of that agreement, right? And I won't name them, but everybody knows whom I'm talking about. Today is not the case. Today is you create innovation and you give it to the public to actually take that innovation and run with it. So I think that's what this community should do.
I think that's a wonderful way to summarize that. And you talked about potion and a potion for all, right? What would be your inputs to us, in terms of that potion, right? What do you think are going to be some of the key ingredients as we create an army to make that potion accessible to everyone in that village, right? What are those top 3 or top 2 ingredients of that potion that you think are a must-have?
I think the first is the insights that you can cull. I think when you're running a business, it's very easy to get lost in the top line. That's where you guys can step in and actually go 2 levels below and say, this is the data around your consumer. This is the data around the investment products. This is the data around the kind of, engagement that your customer is having. That data, if you can surface that, then it kind of makes the conversation very not only fact driven, but more than that, your business starts to get aligned with the data insights that are driving it. That's the first thing that I think you can do very well. Two, apart from the insights, allowing proxy information to do the talking is going to be very, very important, because this is such a big country. We are such a massive country where billions of people. If every year we add even a few million people, right, to the financial inclusion market, if I were to call it, you're going to generate hundreds and hundreds of kinds of data regarding each person on each engagement, on each transaction. Is all of that information going to be tapped and going to be structured? I doubt it. So what does that mean? Proxy information, and good proxy information that can be used as a lead or a lag indicator to make decisions is going to be very, very critical. I think that's another thing you can do. And the third part of the portion is general awareness and education. I think if you can create those three things, I think that would be the portion that I would recommend.
Wonderful. I think quite a bit of insights on that. And my last question, and that stems from the last, the three ingredients you mentioned. I'll come back to what you mentioned. I'll put myself at the consumer's shoe for once. Right. And I'll request you to put once yourself as a consumer, right? As you fairly said that, as the millions of Indians get added to financial inclusion, and there are tons of information that gets generated, and we look at proxy information. As a consumer, sometimes I feel like, I'm generating so much information, and that, last week I was talking to this, talking to a bunch of people in an MNC, and, their curiousness came, while they love the idea of using intelligence to grow their business, their curiousness came that as consumers, what am I getting out of it? Right? And it's a question that comes to most of us, right? I personally sometimes think my information is available out there. What am I getting? What would be your thought as a consumer as we move towards a more data-driven world? That, we've talked about data democracy, we've talked about data monetization, we've talked about all of these concepts in the past in different places. As a consumer, what would be your thought in terms of this entire DPI evolving, in terms of this information being accessible and insights? As a consumer, what should be our expectation?
I think as a consumer, I think the expectation should be, I keep going back, right? Phone user. I think every time I download an app, right, it asks me a question, do you want to allow this app to track what you're doing? I say no. Whenever, I want to sign in, it asks me if I'm using ID to sign into something, it asks me, should we mask your email or should we expose your email? So I say I choose to mask it. So I think allowing me to make a decision is going to be the most critical thing. But does it mean that I'm going to say no to everything? No, I'm not saying that. Like, for example, I play some of these games, there are these, mind games that are there on my phone. And I ask when the app asks me, can we track what you're doing? I say yes. When my latest sound upgrade happens on my system at home, it asks me, can we provide user statistics back for improving the product and experience? I said yes. So what am I doing? I will allow you to take my information with my permission. That's the first thing. Second is, if that product is useful, really useful for me, I'm happy to share my insights. So what I'm trying to say here is that this is a great way for companies to figure out whether or not their product is actually essential or not to your end customer, which is what we also refer to as ABC analyses in manufacturing. A are the A items, B are the B items, C are the least important items. But the point here being, as long as I am empowered as a consumer, I think consumers can make the right choice for themselves.
Fantastic. I think thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and it was wonderful to chat with you and learn so much today.
Thank you so much, Rajit, for having me over. It was wonderful to be here, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.